Hi, I'm Linda.
And I'm Sarah. Are you ready?
Oh yeah, I'm ready. Let's get relational.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Let's Get Relational.
Today we're doing something a little different here and recording from our own separate homes. And look at our pretty backgrounds. This
You can
one's
tell
new.
we have a similar taste.
Yeah.
Usually we record in the studio at my house and this is our background, but Sarah bought something very similar.
Indeed. Not for this purpose, but it works well for it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So today we're talking about It's All About Me.
Yeah.
We love this topic. Why do we love this topic, Sarah?
I mean, it's like we both have experiences where with people that are really self-focused, and like part of what has happened in kind of our society is that a lot of people have been taught to really just like only focus on themselves and not have interest in other people and how they're feeling and how they're doing and what they're doing. And so we have this sort of, as you've stated in a previous video, I'm going to copy you, is an epidemic of self-centered people, of just who are so focused on themselves, their own problems, their own hullabaloo, whatever the hell it is, that they just have no, it's like they have blinders on towards everything else going on around them with other people, with other things. Like they can't see past me. Like they can't see past themselves, like their little me bubble. And so we've had people in our lives that are like that, and it's difficult to kind of connect with those people because it's not like an equal footing that you're on for communication wise of like what you're able to talk about. Because even if you want to share something about you, it's like they just don't really have the wherewithal to understand, that that's something that they need to focus on. It's just they are very focused
Because they immediately make it about themselves.
Yeah.
And that's the part that makes us both kind of crazy. It's like if you're going to go to the effort of sharing and being vulnerable and increasing intimacy, then you really feel like you want to make sure the other person is listening to you and they're not listening to you just to make it about themselves.
Yeah.
So one of the things as we were talking about this, one of the things we wanted to propose is think about what you are doing in your conversations in your life and just even how you think about things, not even if you're with another person. Is it always about you? Or is it never about you? And that's the thing to really dig in a little bit with. And if you're always listening to validate that person's experience because you've had a similar experience, if you're listening to that person to share a personal experience because you think that's going to help them, you're not really listening.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that is so important, is like we really need to listen to hear the other person.
Yeah, we spend, so much time also like listening to respond, as we've said multiple times before, is to really like build a response. So we're never, so many of us are stuck in that sort of loop. So we're not trying to take in what the other person is saying and not necessarily internalize it, but be able taking it in and working it through so you understand it and understand where they're coming from and like what they really want and are saying and like what any emotion is behind it. So you can ask questions to be like, hey, I'm sensing there's something behind this. Can you explain further? Or did something happen to you today that's brought this up for you? Because like this isn't something that we normally talk about. So because with listening, there comes like multiple layers of listening, I want to say, where you're like, just listening to respond to someone, listening to understand, and listening to understand, and then figure out if there's more going on that they maybe haven't said themselves. So.
Yeah, one of the things that we like to do is encourage our clients to do a listening audit on themselves. And so really pay attention the next time somebody is sharing with you, whether it's a spouse, a romantic partner, a coworker, a boss, a child, a sibling, whatever it is, a friend. When they're talking to you, how are you listening? And we were writing blog posts the other day. It's kind of fun. Some days we sit down and we each write our responses to questions we've been getting from people in our community. And it's really fun to just each of us write them and then to come together afterwards and say, what did Sarah say? And what did Linda say?
Mhm.
Because we're not doing it at the same time and having a conversation about it. We just take the question and respond. And one of the things that we were looking at was just the ability to listen to people and not feel like you are having a response. So like one of the questions was, my child doesn't talk to me anymore. So, some of our questions were, well, how are you listening? And
Yeah.
what is it you're listening to about what they say? Are you listening to correct them, to judge them, to tell them
Mhm.
how they should be thinking differently? Or are you really listening to what their experience is? And we both had that experience with friends and with other adults in our lives. And it's super important to be able to pay attention to whether you're trying to be right or whether you're just trying to listen. I've had friends who listen to other people for the purpose of deciding whether or not their experience is valid. And I never heard of people doing that, but apparently it's more common than I realized.
Mm.
And so it's like, well, I listened to your story and what you felt like, and I can then decide whether or not you should have felt that way. And that's how I can help you. And it's like, wow, because everybody's experience is valid just by itself.
Yeah.
So if I feel a certain way in a certain situation, I'm not wrong just because you don't feel that way in that situation.
Yeah, no, it's just your emotions are whatever you experience is totally like a valid thing that you experience. It may not, make much sense as to why you're experiencing it, but it's still a valid experience that you're having, and it's just your responsibility to work out what it is that you're feeling. But someone can't decide whether or not whatever emotions you've experienced due to a situation are valid or not, because then they're basically invalidating what the whole experience that you went through. And I think that can be a problem also that we've experienced with a lot of people who have experienced trauma. Someone coming in and being like, well, that wasn't really like, oh, I've experienced that, that's not really traumatic, so you shouldn't have had feelings like that. And it's like, no, 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 no. That's like so problematic.
Yeah.
um
Or saying things like, you think that's bad, here's what happened to me, and then you
yeah,
totally feel shut down and invalidated, like your experience didn't matter.
yeah, like no, whatever. And that's, then it also goes into the whole thing where we think it's a competition of who had it worse, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's like everyone experiences things differently. So stubbing your toe may not be a big deal for you, but stubbing their toe for a friend might be a really big problem, because maybe they've broken their toe before and it hurts
Yeah.
like 10 times more than you, but it's like they just stubbed their toe. Like, it's not supposed to hurt that much, but for them it could be a serious problem. So like apply that to us, to other things in your life
Well, we
where
all experience pain differently.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
just like, it's that thing. Like, you may not know what this other person may have gone through in the past that would bring up a certain degree of feeling, or the level of feelings that they're having over this thing or this situation, because you didn't experience that. Maybe you experienced something similar, but maybe it was as often as they did, or was as I don't know, as intense. So you can't assume, even though like the same thing happened to you, even if something did, that it's like you'd have the same experience, and therefore you can decide whether or not they're allowed to have certain feelings about it. Like,
Yeah. A little weird, huh? Well,
uh-huh.
the other thing related to that is I had some trauma in my childhood, and I always was like, oh, that, these people had this much worse, this happened to them or that happened to them. And I had to have a number of teachers and healers and therapists work with me to say, Linda, what happened to you was bad. And it's okay to let it be bad and not to discount what happened to you and how it affected you in your life. And, I think a lot of our parents and our guardians and the people who've raised us do the best they can, but it doesn't mean that they gave you everything you needed. Even in our relationship, I am doing the best I can. I have been doing the best I can,
Yeah.
but I see the places where I obviously didn't give you everything you needed. And I don't think it's our job to give us each other everything we need. It's our job to help guide our kids to figure out how to get what they need,
Mhm.
and to have their needs met in some other ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
So,
one of the other concepts we talk about a lot is sorting by self or others.
mhm.
And we've kind of covered the concept a little bit in what we've just talked about, but The basic idea is when you are listening to someone else, when you are reading about somebody's experience, when you're paying attention to what's happening in someone else's life, are you sorting what's happening to that person according to you, or are you sorting that experience by what's happening to them? Are you able to be objective and be able to hold that person in the space of it's happening to them? It has nothing to do with you. And we have a hard time with that in our culture, American culture particularly, because everything is about us. You know, when I look at COVID and the way that the people in our culture are handling it, and the way they're handling it in other cultures around the world, it seems to me there's a huge difference, because a lot of Americans feel like we're so independent and nobody should be able to tell us what to do. And we really don't have, at this point in history anyway, a big commitment to the greater good, and that we do these things so that other people are going to have a great experience. We're really in it for us and what we can get out of it for us. It's all about me.
Yeah.
And I think historically, there probably were times in our country's history where we did rise to the occasion and it was more of a greater good kind of thing. But in my lifetime, I have not seen a lot of that. You know, I hang out with the people who are interested in the greater good. I think Sarah hangs out with people who are interested in the greater good. But we're exposed to a lot of people who are fiercely independent and anti anything that feels like they're getting controlled. And that's a place where you have to look at, you know, is it all about you, or can you objectively look at what's going on and say, wow, how can I contribute to solving this issue in a way that is not about me, but it's about what's going to be best for a bigger group of people.
Mhm. And the other thing too is like, it's okay to also like if someone is talking about something and you're like, oh, I've also had that experience. This is what I did to help myself through that, or this is what I did to sort of work through that. Maybe that would be helpful to you. I've also gotten these suggestions. Like there's a very different way of being like, oh, I've gone through something similar. Here's what I did, and like suggest things versus like, oh yeah, that happened to me, and like blah, 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 and go into the whole story about it.
Well, and it's really good to ask permission too. You know,
Yeah.
I had a similar thing happen. Are you interested in me sharing about my response to it and what people suggested to me, or do you just want me to listen to you?
Yeah.
You know, because we don't have to be fixers. We don't have to go out and try to fix the world. We need to ask people what they want and come from a place of being of service. And that service might be just shutting up and listening. And we're not good at that, most of us.
Yeah.
In one of the posts I was writing the other day, I was talking about relationships where we banter a lot, you know, and we'll talk over each other, and there's a lot of laughter, and people don't often get a thought finished and stuff. But the intent there isn't to speak to be heard. It's to be heard, but it's not to have like a deeper conversation. And it's funny and you know, it's fast, and we have to really be careful to differentiate that kind of conversation from the conversations we also have where it's a deeper sharing conversation. And I think it's really easy if you've got both relationships with some friends to mix that up a little bit and thinking you're in a bantering conversation when the other person really wants to be heard. And you don't know that whatever the question is that you're all answering. Like I was out with some friends the other day and we were all answering a question about something. And it was in that banter mode at first. And then it was a really deep response they wanted to share. And they got upset that we weren't really listening, that we continued bantering and wanted to withdraw. And we had to say, no, we hear that that's important to you. We will stop. We apologize. And we're going to move into listening mode now and not bantering mode. And that's the important thing is like, it's so easy to just like withdraw and say, okay, fine, I'm out. You don't want to hear?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna talk anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and that's because everything is filtered. Everything you listen to is filtered through how it relates to you.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing too, it's like that's what it's like communication is so important. Yeah. Just that like if you know, in that kind of setting, you know, the other thing that could have happened is that the person communicated, be like, hey, I know that we're having fun right now, but I actually would like to share something really deep, and set it up so that you all are like, oh, okay, listening ears on, let's do this. I'm like 100% focused on what you have to say, and I want to understand what's going on for you.
Yeah,
like,
time to shift. Yeah.
So like that's the other thing that you can do as someone who wants to share as well, is that you can communicate and say up front, hey, I know this is what we're doing right now, but I actually would really like to share something that's very personal to me. And then people will be like, oh, okay, so that you're not having to have this awkward of like, they're not necessarily paying attention to you because you didn't explain that this is where you are coming from of what you wanted to share. So there's two sides to that. It's also really great that you and your friends were able to be like, flip the switch basically and be like, oh, my apologies, we're listening, we didn't realize that's where you were going with your response. So
Yeah. Well, the other thing I want to say about that, I love what you said about it's your personal responsibility to say, hey, I know we're joking around about stuff, but something really significant happened to me here. You're all joking about your experiences. Mine wasn't so funny, and so I do want to share that because now we brought it up. I really feel like I want to be heard. But the other thing is really looking at your own behavior. And do you always have to bring everything down and make it about you and make it heavy and serious? And so it's examining your own behavior. Like, is that another way you're just making it all about you? And is there a way for you to lighten up and go with the party and find another time to share, and it may be perfectly appropriate for you in that moment.
Yeah.
You may not be that person that it's all about you, but start looking at those places where we know some people who we've noticed a pattern that if they're not getting a significant amount of attention, they suddenly leave the gathering. And it's been so interesting to watch. And I am not that person. I tend to get, if I'm not getting a lot of attention and other people are needing the attention, I'm okay with that. But I do tend to go a little internal and just listen more and talk less if it's really clear to me that some other people need more attention. And there are days when I want more attention. But for me, I really work at not making it always about me. And Sarah, have you had some of those experiences with friends and family members where they always turn it around to be about them?
Yeah, it's like it's so easy to come across. And some
Yeah.
people are like, it's just it could be a way of them like still working out some sort of trauma that they've experienced in their childhood, where they maybe didn't get the attention that they needed, and so now they're kind of working toward like that's just how they roll now, because that's their coping mechanism of dealing with the void inside them, is making stuff about them so that they feel like they're getting the love and attention that they always deserved but maybe didn't get. And then but it usually comes to in some ways that there is some sort of void that those people are trying to fill, and like a lot of them don't realize that there is in fact some sort of empty space inside of them that they're trying to fill, but it's almost like they don't realize that. So it's this like canister that has a bunch of holes in it, so anything that they're putting inside of it is also just coming out again, so it doesn't stay. So they keep doing the same stuff over and over and over again, expecting to like feel better, and it doesn't work.
They
So it's
can never
really
fill that bucket with the holes in it.
you have to, that's why you have to focus internally, work on the relationship you have with yourself, to understand yourself and understand what you're going through, so that you can patch up those holes in those canisters inside yourself, your internal reservoirs and the like, so that when you are filling it up, the contents remain inside, because that's what you want. You want the contents to remain inside the reservoir, not outside the reservoir.
Well, yeah, because otherwise people could give you all the love in the world and you'd never feel it because it's just going right through.
Yeah, and it would still not be enough. But
Yeah.
that's the thing; it still would not be enough. So,
Yeah.
that's why, like I have it's like I empathize with those people, and just like like in the sense that, wow, that must be really difficult for feeling like you never got the love that you wanted, and so now you're trying to find ways to fill that up, and it's and in those cases, it's like, if for people that I'm really close to, like I will mention something like that, like eventually I sit down and have a conversation and be like, I've noticed that you do this, and for some people that I have in my life, it comes out in very materialistic things, where they have weird money issues, but that's common with a lot of people. Money is a very interesting thing that people worry about. But I'll also just say that very vaguely. But so some people, it's like they'll constantly buy things, but also be really worried about money all the time. That's a very, very common thing. And it's just, again, it's they're thinking that materials will make them happy because they're not inside. So I feel like I went on a little tangent there. I'm sorry.
No need to
But
apologize. I think the other piece related to this is the whole sense of whether it's all about you or never about you. Are you always the victim or are you always the martyr? And it was really hard for me when I was younger to have somebody point out to me, because I gave and gave and gave and gave. And this friend pointed out to me that I must get something out of it or I wouldn't keep doing it. I was so offended because I just thought I should be praised, I think, for everything I was giving. And he said, well, clearly you get something out of it or you wouldn't give all the time. What would happen if you weren't the one having to give all the time? What would happen if you just took care of yourself and made sure your needs were met and didn't feel like everybody else's needs had to happen before yours? And, making sure that you're not in a place where you're feeling like you're constantly victimized or that you're constantly a martyr. It's not all about you, but you are super important. Only you can fill up your reservoir, as Sarah said today. Only you can do that. Only you can take care of your needs first. You can't give from an empty vessel because the giving feels needy and like you're trying to get something from other people.
yeah, you're expecting a return. You're expecting a
Yeah,
return on your investment, basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
an
So,
ROI.
yeah. So you're really looking at when you are in that place of giving, are you giving it from a pure heart? Are you giving it because you truly are filled up yourself and want to give? Or are you giving it because you're supposed to, you should, you feel like everybody else expects you to? That's kind of being a victim and a martyr. And that's not very empowering. And it doesn't make you the best listener. It doesn't make you the best partner, parent, friend, any of those kinds of things. It's, people want to be in relationship with all of you, not just the part that is giving and won't receive. It took me a long time to learn to stop giving so much because I was getting my identity needs met from giving all the time. And I had to learn to let people receive. It's a really beautiful thing to be able to give to other people. I really love being able to offer something and have someone receive it from me. And I had to learn how to let people give to me so that I could receive and let them have the pleasure of giving.
Yeah, that's really important to be able to have that back and forth going on. And like I have going on to like the victim martyr thing again. Like I've had some past acquaintances / friends who were really like their entire headspace was just focused on victimhood. Like everything that goes wrong, in their life, like it could be like, for example, it could be very random. Like let's say they had to write a college essay or something like that, like an essay or whatever. And then they thought and they probably crammed it or something. You know how college students do it. Not a lot of them spend all of their time planning out their schedule and having enough time to write all of these things. So it might have been crammed, but let's say they got a really bad grade on it. It's not their fault. They blame it on extenuating circumstances. Like I was really tired that day. I had been up the late night before working on some other project. And so like, I was really tired, or like, oh, my teacher's just an asshole, kind of thing, like something like that. Like, the teacher doesn't like me, just, something like that, where it's not because they didn't take the time and set aside the time to work on it so that it would be as good as it could be. And like a lot of people go about their lives doing that kind of stuff, where they go do something and it doesn't work out well. And it's usually when things don't work out well that suddenly it has nothing to do with them and they don't take responsibility for it. And it becomes all of these other circumstances surrounding the situation are what caused the problem, and so therefore it's not their fault and they don't have to take responsibility for it. And that's why being around people who are constantly in that victim space, I can't really deal with it, because it's just too much of like, they refuse to take responsibility for their own shit. They just like refuse to do it. They don't see it as anything other than like, oh, it's everyone else's problem that this issue happened. It's not mine. And like trying to be in a relationship, like like romantically involved with a person like that, like damn, like, because whenever you're trying to have a conversation with a person like that about something that that's affected you, that they've done, it's not their fault. They put it off on something else. And I've had this personally happen, not in a romantic relationship, but with another person, an adult in my life that may or may not be related to me. Not this one, another one, as in not this mom, another person, who really could not take responsibility for the issues in our relationship that they caused. And so it was a lot about me trying to learn that, oh, they're affecting me and making me upset and doing these things that are pretty poopy, you know? And so trying to have conversations to fix that. And they're like, they would blame it on like teenage rebellion. Like, the issue is that I'm like a 17-year-old girl, and therefore I'm wanting to regain my independence, and I want to go frolic in the forest and not have anyone tell me what to do, you know? And it's like, I came home and I told my mom this, and she looked at me like, are you nuts? And I was like, she did it again. Because it was like also a form of trying to convince me that it wasn't her fault and she didn't need to take responsibility for it. So there's also that. And so I would really take a look at how you respond to things when things go wrong, because that's where it shows up. Like when things go wrong, when someone in your life comes and tells you something that, you know, doesn't make you feel good, as in like, oh, you've really upset me over this, or because of something that you said, I've been really angry and I haven't wanted to talk to you. Like, what's the response that you come with? Do you apologize and like decide that I'm going to change my behavior? Or do you say, I'm so sorry, it was because of this and this and this and this and this and this and this? Are there excuses that you come up with to, you know, explain your behavior? And I see you want to say something, so go.
Well, I'm just going to say, I'm sorry is a complete sentence. It's not, I'm sorry, it was because of this, this, and this, and this. It's, I'm sorry. I see that my behavior hurt you. I'm sorry that you heard it that way. That wasn't my intention. Can we talk about it again? Mm-hmm. You know, and I think that everything we talk about comes back to personal responsibility. If relationships in your life aren't working, come back to that sense of personal responsibility. So Sarah, in that situation she was sharing about, claimed personal responsibility for what she could change. And she had to let go of the parts of that relationship that she couldn't change. Mm-hmm. And that didn't have anything to do with anybody else. That had to do with her just having an awareness and not making that whole relationship all about her, but some of the relationship had to be about her. And in that case, it was more about the other parent, and the other parent trying to influence things in certain ways that didn't acknowledge Sarah's feelings. Yeah. In a way that Sarah felt heard. And I think that's the part we've worked on the most, is making sure that we both are able to communicate in a way that we both feel heard. Now, we're sometimes short with each other. We're sometimes talk over each other. Yep. We sometimes are sharp with each other, mm-hmm. and we come back. Yeah, if we feel like it's needed, and say, I was kind of sharp with you. I didn't really mean that. And I was feeling this way. That's not an excuse, but here's what was going on, just so you understand. But the thing is, we don't take it personally anymore. You know, our feelings don't get hurt. We don't feel like it's going to be the end of our relationship if we disagree, or we have a sharp moment. And mostly, and we've talked about this before, we try to be humorous about it. We try to be funny. because if you can lighten things up with humor a little bit, and you've heard Sarah do her funny voices and all of that, she's very good at like, oh, I can't even do it. I'm not even going to try. But being able to just use that funny voice and say, I didn't mean to do that. My bad.
Oh, I goofed. My apologies. I'm
Yeah.
quite sorry. Like I'll do if like I'll do that all the time. Like I'll say it probably in some weird accent or something. I'll be like, "Ooh, I've done goofed. I've done a goofing."
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
and for those of you who don't have that relationship with the person you live with, or the person you parent, or the person who parents you, it takes work, and it takes coming back time after time and saying, we want this to be different. It takes a tremendous investment in your relationship. I was not willing to let go of Sarah when we went through a terrible breakup, her other parent and I was not willing to let go of her. And I took a strong stand and just said, we're going to work through this. I don't know what it's going to look like. And I had to let go of all my attachments to what it would look like. And that was actually a great training ground for me to create my other friendships and relationships, to be able to say, I don't know what these are going to look like. And I can't go into them with a preconceived notion that friendship looks like this and it only looks like this. So I have all kinds of different friends that I do different kinds of things with, friends that I have deeper relationships with, friends I have lighter, more bantering relationships with. And I think Sarah's the same way.
oh yeah, like I don't have like copy paste of the same friend, like, I have very different people in my life who have very different viewpoints on things, on relationships, on how to talk to people, like drastically different in some cases.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, but the thing is, I'm able to meet all of them and sort of understand where they're coming from based on how they were raised, how they grew up, the sort of experience that they've had. Because I do have like, as a white woman, I'm going to have a different experience than a friend of mine who is also a woman, but a woman of color. And so
right.
There's also going to be differences in that and how they see things, or how, that kind of thing. Because culturally, it's going to be different for them. They're going to be, and the culture of how they were raised could be different. Bunch of things. So, but I respect that and I understand that. So I enjoy hearing what they have to say about certain situations, because it's going to be a drastically different thing than another friend of mine, or even my own opinion of it. So it's good to have that sort of not necessarily a dichotomy, but it's kind of a mixing pot,
Definitely a mixing pot
of just different opinions that people have, and different viewpoints, so that you get plenty of different perspectives on more difficult situations. And sometimes I'll ask questions just because of the drastic difference in like opinion, mostly just because sometimes I need to hear like the drastic one, the like really like critical and harsh one, like I'll never talk to him again. I'm like, okay, well that's not really what I want to do, but I'm glad that you have told me that that's a thing that I can do. Like sometimes it's nice to have that permission of someone who is just like, you know what, get fucking rid of them, like skedaddle. Like sometimes you don't necessarily want to admit that to yourself, but it's nice to have someone that's in your corner being like, if you really wanted to, you could leave. Like, so
yeah, I had to do some work this year on who did I feel really good about being around, and who made me feel really small and judged and like I was walking on eggshells. And I made a big decision to let go of anybody that made me feel small and like I had to walk on eggshells to be around them. Like I can see them out socially, like not a big deal, but I'm not going to spend energy on a relationship where I felt like I was being judged and I was having to be careful about what I said all the time. And that's a tough one.
That's not
fun. So I just want to recap a little bit. The biggest thing I think, as we're talking about this topic, is for you to really internally look at and listen to your own dialogue internally and with other people. Is it all about you or never about you? And really do a listening audit on yourself and pay attention to how you listen to other people, because most of us don't listen the way we think we do. So I started practicing with Sarah when she was a teenager, and we were going through the big drama and all of that, and I've shared this before in other episodes, where I would just sit like this. So I wouldn't say anything.
She'd
'Cause,
sit with her hand over her mouth for those who are
oh yeah,
our audio listeners.
For people, yeah, sorry. I interrupted you. What she was saying was, for those of you who are just listening and aren't watching, I would put my hand over my mouth, literally put my hand on my mouth, and just sit there, so that I would have a reminder not to talk, to allow her to have all the space she needed to say what she needed to say. And then I could model for her that you listen to people. You let them have their say, you let them listen. And if she interrupted me while I was talking, I'd say, well, wait, I want to be able to talk now too. And she could learn how to do that. And she's gotten really good at that. That is a skill that most of us aren't born with, I don't think. But it's definitely something every single person can learn.
It's part of the art of conversation.
Yeah.
And like the art of conversation isn't is not something you're born with. Ooh, no. Anyone wants to tell you, yeah, I like the second I popped out of the womb, I knew how to have a conversation. It was written in my DNA. It's like, dude, I really think not.
Yeah, somewhere you learned that skill.
Yeah, it's absolutely a learned one. And it's learned through, the modeling of other people in your life who are paying attention and to other people, to themselves, how they talk to themselves, how they talk to other people, how they spoke to you and what they did for you. Like my mom, as she said, like she really did like model like how to communicate really well, how to express myself, and that I could take the time to find the words to articulate what I wanted to say. And like I didn't need to like have all of the words like right then and there in the moment, but I could take the time to figure that out. And she would be willing to listen then too. So, having someone modeling that in your life is going to greatly impact how you're able to communicate further along in your other relationships.
I totally agree. And for me growing up, I wouldn't say that either of my parents modeled that very well, but I was really fortunate to be raised in a church where other people modeled that really well for me. So I remember I was, as a teenager, I was in the adult choir, and I would be driven to choir rehearsal by other adults. And they really modeled for me, listening to me. They gave me a space to listen, and they shared their experience and allowed me to listen to them. So I learned a lot about that from all of that. And they didn't make it about themselves. I had some people who were really kind of advanced in their abilities to communicate and relate. And they made it a priority to give me that space and allow me to feel heard. And that was such a gift, so anytime you've got that opportunity to do that with other young people, if you're an adult listening to this, it doesn't matter who the young person is in your life. That is such a gift to a young person to be heard. And it's a gift even for me at my stage of life. I love being present with people and having a space where I can feel heard, because I kept everything inside for so many years because I didn't feel safe. And so now for me, it's not as big a deal to share, but for a long time it was, and it didn't feel safe. And I felt awkward. And so that's why I became such a good listener, because I didn't feel safe sharing my feelings. And so it's such a great honor to be able to be present for people in that way. And it's also an honor for them when you allow them to be present for you. So that's all I have to say today, Sarah. You got anything more?
No.
All right. Awesome. Well, we'll look forward to being with you again. Mm-hmm. And for now, just remember, we love you. Mwah.